My name is Kyrie.
Hi, my name is Hakeem. Hi, my name is Taj. Hi, my name is Bilal.
Remember the boys? Here's what happened to Motown's forgotten boy band. What started as family singing for Father's Day money became a nightmare of exploitation that would destroy one of Motown's most promising acts.
So it gets kind of tiring, but I mean, it's worth it though after, once you see the finished product on the screen, like, yeah, I worked for that.
They became Motown's youngest producers ever, then shocked the industry by rejecting millions to start over in Gambia.
It was really hard trying to smile when inside you're crying. I'm totally miserable.
This is how a desperate plan on Venice Beach led to the most shocking exit in R&B history. So, let's get into it. Summer 1984 burned hot on the Venice Beach boardwalk when four young brothers stepped onto the sand with nothing but their voices and a desperate plan. Kyrie, Hakeem, Taj, and Bilal Abdul Samad needed $50 for a Father's Day gift, and their mother Angela suggested they try singing for tips. Within hours, they had earned more than they expected. Within weeks, they were making thousands.
Because I think once people saw them, they just fell in love with them.
The Abdul Samad brothers weren't typical street performers. Their grandmother had taught them singing, dancing, and acting from an early age. Their parents, Jabari and Angela, watched their sons perform and saw something special. These weren't just kids making noise for pocket change. These boys had real talent, and their father knew it was time to take this seriously. Jabari enrolled in a 4-week entertainment management course at Los Angeles Trade Technical College. For a man with no industry experience, this crash course would prove invaluable. He learned about contracts, management, and most importantly, how to protect his son's interests. That education would save the family from the traps that destroyed so many other child acts. By 1986, the brothers had outgrown Venice Beach. They started performing at talent shows and private parties under the name The Boys Party Time Affair. They worked birthday parties for wealthy kids in Beverly Hills, including Rod Stewart's son. Word spread quickly through Southern California's entertainment circles about these four brothers who could sing, dance, and put on a show that left audiences stunned. The breakthrough came during a talent show when the announcer asked Angela what the group was called. She answered spontaneously, "My Boys," then corrected herself to "The Boys." The name stuck, and their destiny was sealed. Jabari produced a demo tape in their home studio and sent it to 3 major labels: MCA, Motown, and Solar Records. All 3 companies wanted to sign them immediately. The bidding war was fierce, but Jarrell Busby at MCA made the strongest impression. When MCA purchased Motown Records in 1988 and Busby became the new president, the boys found themselves at the legendary label that had launched the Jackson 5.
The youngest members in the Motown record family, they're brothers ages 9, 11, 13, and 14. And they call themselves the Boys. These are my boys.
Busby had big plans. He wanted Jackson 5-level success, but would settle for new edition numbers. Either way, the boys were positioned to become Motown's next big thing. They had the talent, the look, and most importantly, they could write and produce their own music. At ages ranging from 10 to 15, they were about to become Motown's youngest producers ever. Recording their debut album became a crash course in industry politics and family dynamics. When the boys entered the studio in 1987, they met Kenneth "Babyface" Edmonds and L.A. Reid, the hottest production team in R&B. Initially, the brothers weren't impressed with the songs Babyface had written for them. The tracks felt too polished, too adult for their young voices. Everything changed when Babyface performed the songs live at their house. Suddenly, the brothers understood the vision. "Dial My Heart," "Lucky Charm," and "A Little Romance" weren't just songs, they were potential hits that could launch their careers into orbit. But success came with unexpected complications. Kiri was 13 when they started recording, and his voice began changing during the sessions. The high notes he was supposed to hit on songs like Lucky Charm became impossible. Studio time was expensive, and Motown was investing serious money in their debut. Something had to give. The solution split the family in ways that would echo for years. Kyrie's parts were reassigned to his younger brother Hakeem, who was only 11, but could still hit those crucial high notes. For Kyrie, watching his spotlight moment handed to his little brother was devastating. He had dreamed of being the lead singer, the star of the group. To prevent further jealousy and resentment, the family made a crucial decision. Lead vocals would be shared equally among all 4 brothers on future songs. No one brother would become the face of the boys. It was a democratic approach that kept the peace, but it also meant none of them could develop the individual star power that might have sustained longer careers. The recording process revealed another source of tension. Motown executives kept pushing Jabari to hire a professional manager, claiming he and Angela lacked industry experience. The label wanted someone they could control, someone who understood how the business really worked. But Jabari had learned too much during his trade school course to give up control. He held on to all merchandising rights, ancillary deals, and management decisions. When Dial My Heart was released in October 1988, it shot straight to #1 on the R&B charts. The boys, ranging in age from 10 to 15, were suddenly stars. Their follow-up single, Lucky Charm, also hit #1. By any measure, their debut album, Messages from the Boys, was a massive success, eventually going platinum. But behind the success, cracks were forming. The brothers were traveling constantly, missing school, and living under intense pressure to perform. Their childhood was disappearing into recording studios and concert venues. Motown's marketing machine treated them like products, not people. By 1990, the boys had proven they weren't just another manufactured group. Their second album gave them creative control that most artists never achieved, especially at their age. Kyrie and Hakeem co-wrote and produced their biggest hit, Crazy, showing Motown that these weren't typical teenage performers who needed everything handed to them. The success of Crazy should have been pure celebration. The song hit #1 on the R&B charts and crossed over to mainstream success. Pepsi featured it in a major commercial campaign. But the real money came from an unexpected source that revealed Jabari's business genius. While Motown focused on record sales, Jabari set up a 900 number where fans could pay $2.50 per minute to supposedly chat with the boys in real time. The phone line generated massive revenue, and because Jabari had kept all ancillary rights, Motown couldn't touch a penny of it. The label executives were furious, but there was nothing they could do. This financial independence gave the boys leverage that most artists never had. But it also made them targets within Motown. Label executives who had initially celebrated the brothers' talent now saw them as threats to the traditional power structure. Why were these teenagers making more money from side deals than from their record contract? The tension exploded during production of their third album, The Saga Continues, in 1992. The boys wanted to produce the entire project themselves, but Motown kept interfering with their creative vision. The label was also pushing them to work with their roster of approved producers, effectively sidelining the brothers' own abilities. When the album was released, Motown's promotion was half-hearted at best. Singles that should have been hits got lost in the shuffle. The title track, Doin' It With the B, barely registered on the charts. For a group that had delivered 3 #1 singles, this level of neglect felt intentional. Behind the scenes, the boys were also trying to develop other artists through their production work. They had signed Small Change and Another Act to their HAK Records imprint, But Motown showed no interest in supporting these projects. The label wanted the boys to focus solely on their own recording career, not branch out into production and artist development. The message was clear. Motown would tolerate the boys' independence only as long as it served the label's interests. The moment the brothers started building their own empire, the support would disappear. When their contract expired in 1993, Motown offered the boys everything they thought the brothers wanted: a 6-year deal with a generous upfront advance, their own label imprint with full artist development support, creative control over their music. On paper, it was the kind of deal that most artists could only dream about. The boys initially accepted. They signed the contracts, posed for the photos, and prepared for the next phase of their careers. But something felt wrong. The same executives who had been undermining their creative control were now promising complete artistic freedom. The same label that had ignored their self-produced album was suddenly eager to give them their own imprint.
It's kind of tiring, but I mean, it's worth it though after, once you see the finished product on the screen, like, yeah.
Jabari and the brothers spent weeks discussing their options. They had money in the bank from their ancillary deals. They owned their own recording equipment and could produce professional quality music without label support. Most importantly, they had learned enough about the industry to survive independently. The final straw came when Motown's new president, Andre Harrell, replaced Jarrell Busby. Harrell had different priorities and different ideas about how the boys should develop their careers. The personal relationships that had protected the brothers were suddenly gone, replaced by corporate executives who saw them as just another asset to manage. In a move that shocked the entire music industry, the boys walked away from their 6-year deal. They gave back the advance money and terminated their relationship with Motown completely. No press releases were issued. No explanations were offered. The boys simply disappeared from the recording industry. The decision to leave Motown wasn't just about business frustration. The Abdul Samad brothers were going through a personal transformation that would reshape their entire lives. After 8 years of constant touring, recording, and promotion, they needed time to figure out who they were beyond their celebrity personas. The turning point came when the brothers transitioned to a vegan lifestyle. This dietary change connected them with Atlanta's Afrocentric cultural community, where they met people who encouraged them to explore their African heritage. For young men who had spent their entire careers being marketed as American pop stars, this cultural awakening was profound. They began studying African history, languages, and music traditions. The more they learned, the more disconnected they felt from the American entertainment industry that had defined their lives. The materialism, the competition, the constant pressure to create hits, none of it aligned with their evolving spiritual values. In 1994, inspired by Alex Haley's roots and their own spiritual journey, the brothers made a decision that stunned their friends and family. They would leave America entirely and relocate to Gambia, a small West African nation on the Atlantic coast. This wasn't a vacation or a temporary retreat. They were starting completely new lives.
It was really hard trying to smile when inside you're crying. I'm totally miserable.
The move required enormous courage and planning. They had to sell their Los Angeles properties, liquidate their American assets, and prepare for life in a country where they didn't speak the language or understand the culture. Their parents supported the decision, but many friends and industry contacts thought they had lost their minds. Gambia welcomed them with open arms. The brothers enrolled in language classes, studied local music traditions, and began building relationships with Gambian musicians and producers. They set up a professional recording studio and started experimenting with traditional West African rhythms and instruments. The cultural immersion was total. They learned Wolof and other local languages. They studied traditional Mbalash music and began incorporating those rhythms into their own compositions. Most importantly, they found the spiritual peace that had been missing during their American careers. This wasn't exile or retreat. It was artistic rebirth. The brothers renamed themselves the Sons of Light and began creating music that blended their R&B background with authentic African influences. They weren't trying to commercialize African music for American audiences. They were genuinely becoming African artists. Recording as the Sons of Light felt like starting over, but with hard-earned wisdom and artistic maturity. Their first African-influenced album, Mission, showcased the musical education they had received in Gambia. The brothers weren't mimicking traditional African music. They were creating something entirely new by combining their American R&B training with authentic Mbala rhythms.
And you gave me your life so I could find my way into your sun.
The creative freedom was intoxicating. Without record label deadlines, marketing concerns, or radio programmers to please, the Sons of Light could experiment with extended song structures, complex polyrhythms, and spiritual themes that would never have survived Motown's commercial filtering process. Each brother also began developing individual artistic identities for the first time since childhood. Hakeem recorded a solo project that showcased his grown-up vocals and sophisticated production skills. Taj released 2 solo albums that demonstrated his evolution as a songwriter and producer. After years of being forced to share the spotlight equally, they could finally explore their individual talents. The music they created during this period was their most mature and personally satisfying work. Albums like Millennium Music featured complex arrangements that would have been impossible to create under the pressure of American commercial deadlines. They were making music for artistic satisfaction, not chart positions.
Sun rays is what a flower needs to grow. I need water.
But their African period wasn't just about music. The brothers were building new lives as businessmen, producers, and cultural ambassadors. They used their studio to record local Gambian artists and began developing a network of African musicians and producers. Their American industry experience made them valuable mentors for artists who wanted to reach international audiences. The technological revolution of the early 2000s made their independence even more viable. Digital recording equipment became affordable and portable. Internet distribution eliminated the need for major label marketing support. For the first time in music history, talented artists could build sustainable careers without corporate backing. Hakeem eventually expanded beyond music, working with major American artists like Akon and New Kids on the Block. His African base actually became an advantage, offering American artists access to authentic African sounds and production techniques that couldn't be replicated in American studios. The brothers proved that success didn't have to be measured by Billboard chart positions or Grammy nominations. They had created sustainable artistic careers on their own terms, supported by their own creativity and business acumen. By the mid-2000s, the American music industry was facing a crisis that vindicated the boys' early departure. Major labels were hemorrhaging money as digital piracy destroyed their traditional revenue streams. Artists who had been dependent on label support found themselves stranded as companies cut rosters and reduced promotional budgets. Meanwhile, the Sons of Light were thriving as independent artists, with multiple revenue streams and complete creative control. Their decision to walk away from Motown in 1993 looked increasingly prophetic as other artists struggled with the industry's collapse. Music industry analysts began studying the boys' career as a case study in artist independence. They had kept their publishing rights, retained control of their master recordings, and built their own distribution networks years before these became standard practices. Their father's decision to take that 4-week entertainment management course had literally saved their careers. The brothers occasionally discussed reuniting for American audiences, particularly as nostalgia for late 80s and early 90s R&B grew stronger. Their original hits, Dial My Heart and Crazy continued generating royalty income and streaming revenue. A proper reunion tour could have generated significant money and reintroduced them to multiple generations of fans. But the logistics were complicated. Hakeem and Bilal had established lives in Gambia with families and business interests that couldn't be easily relocated.
For someone to save the day, I keep praying.
Kiri and Taj remained more connected to the American entertainment industry, but had their own projects and commitments. Coordinating schedules across continents proved nearly impossible. More importantly, the brothers had evolved beyond their teenage personas. They were middle-aged men with sophisticated artistic goals that didn't necessarily align with performing their greatest hits for nostalgic audiences. The spiritual journey that had led them to Africa had also led them away from the commercial entertainment mindset. The music industry that had frustrated them in the 1990s had evolved considerably. Independent artists now had access to global distribution, social media marketing, and streaming platforms that gave them unprecedented control over their careers. In many ways, the industry had finally caught up to the Boys' vision of artistic independence. When TV One announced that The Boys would be featured on their unsung documentary series, it marked their first major American media appearance in over 2 decades. The brothers were finally ready to tell their story on their own terms. In 2018, The Boys appeared on TV One's Unsung series and finally revealed the truth about their disappearance. For 25 years, music fans had speculated about what happened to the group that had delivered 3 #1 hits, then vanished at the height of their success. The documentary provided answers that surprised everyone.
It was definitely a lot of hard work. It wasn't easy.
The brothers looked healthy, happy, and completely at peace with their decisions. They spoke about their African experience with obvious pride and satisfaction. These weren't bitter former stars lamenting lost opportunities. These were successful men who had built meaningful lives on their own terms. The response from fans was overwhelmingly positive. Social media filled with messages from people who had grown up listening to Dial My Heart and Crazy, expressing admiration for the brothers' courage in walking away from an industry that didn't serve their interests. Many fans wished they had known about the Sons of Light's African albums years earlier. The documentary also sparked industry discussions about artist exploitation and the importance of creative control. The Boys' story became a teaching example for young artists about the value of understanding business fundamentals and maintaining artistic independence. For younger generations discovering The Boys for the first time, their story felt incredibly relevant. In an era of social media pressure and commercial optimization, the idea of walking away from success to pursue personal fulfillment resonated powerfully. Their decision to prioritize spiritual growth over financial gain seemed almost revolutionary. The brothers hinted at possible future collaborations but made no firm commitments. They had learned the importance of moving at their own pace and making decisions based on artistic merit rather than commercial pressure. If they reunited, it would be because they had something meaningful to say, not because fans demanded it. Their individual projects continued evolving. Taj's solo work incorporated modern production techniques while maintaining the African influences he had developed in Gambia. Hakeem's collaborations with American artists brought authentic African sounds to mainstream audiences. Each brother had found his own way to honor both his American and African musical heritage. The legacy of The Boys extends far beyond their 3 #1 hits. They demonstrated that artists could survive and thrive outside the traditional industry structure. They proved that success could be measured by personal satisfaction rather than chart positions. Most importantly, They showed that it's never too late to completely reinvent your life and career. Their journey from Venice Beach to Motown to West Africa represents one of the most unique career arcs in popular music history. 4 brothers who started singing for Father's Day money ended up teaching the entire industry about the value of artistic independence and personal integrity. Anyway, that's it for the video, folks. Bye!